Hi, everyone, and welcome to day 2 of the Global South Women's Forum. This is our second Creativity and Cultural Corner for the forum, and we're really excited today to welcome from works from Mavi Morais from Brazil and Dainalyn Swaby from Jamaica. Before we begin, I have a few housekeeping announcements to make. Firstly, as participants, please do turn off your videos and mute your microphones. If you're experiencing slow bandwidth, please close any unnecessary programs and/or applications on your device. Please do feel free to use the public chat box to engage with one another throughout the session. This session is being live streamed on ERA Asia Pacific's Facebook page, and the recording will be available publicly afterwards. ERA Asia Pacific is committed to making GSWF 2021 an inclusive and safe digital environment, and we will not tolerate harassment of any kind, including but not limited to deliberate intimidation and sustained disruption of discussion. Participants are obliged to be respectful and to avoid replicating societal prejudices and inequalities. Participants who engage in disruptive behavior may be removed without prior notice. I'll now hand it over to our session's moderator, Marissa.
Hi everyone, thank you for joining. So today we're going to have creative pieces from Mavi Morais from Brazil and Dainalyn Swaby from Jamaica. So I think we will start with Mavi Morais. She submitted a very short video sharing about herself and her work. And I think we will share that now. Nadia, should I share? Please note the video is in Portuguese, and there's the live caption at the bottom, so you can follow along. And then we'll also link her artwork in the chat that you can take a look.
Sorry, 1 second. I'm just going to share the information in the chat first.
Yeah, no problem at all. We've also provided an English translation to Mavi's video in the chat, so you can also take a look at that so you have an understanding of what she's saying, even though there's live caption.
Olá, eu me chamo Mavi Morais, tenho 26 anos, sou fotógrafa e artista visual de origem cariri-sapuiá, formada em filosofia pela Universidade do Estado da Bahia, e o meu trabalho consiste em criar uma narrativa visual acerca da identidade, espiritualidade, memória ancestral e resistência indígenas, usando de técnicas e linguagem da fotografia como critério para compor colagem digital. Eu comecei na fotografia em 2014 e hoje eu considero que eu só sei fazer colagem digital por causa da minha experiência na fotografia. Eu sou autodidata em fotografia e através da minha experiência eu entendi que eu poderia usar da técnica da fotografia, ou seja, da luz, da sombra, do enquadramento, da perspectiva, da paleta de cores, que são informações que já estão presentes na imagem, para conseguir fazer encaixes em composição de colagem digital. Ao contrário do que muita gente pensa sobre o meu trabalho não fala sobre o futurismo, porque para os povos indígenas o futuro não existe sem o passado e sem o presente. Então eu tento, através das minhas colagens, passar essa ideia do tempo como uma coisa só, como passado, presente e futuro acontecendo simultaneamente. Então a presença de corpos celestes nas minhas colagens não quer representar uma estética futurista, mas fala muito mais sobre essa conexão dos povos indígenas com a dimensão espiritual da floresta, com a dimensão espiritual da natureza e com essa conexão com o cosmos. Para além disso, um dos pontos do futurismo é essa ideia de explorar o espaço. E para mim é muito branca essa vontade de dominar outros planetas, porque o homem branco enxerga a natureza como um produto para ser explorado, enquanto nós estamos aqui lutando para ter direito às nossas próprias terras, aqui na Terra, que é o lugar que a gente reconhece como nossa casa genuína. Então, como nós podemos ter uma perspectiva de futuro, sendo que o nosso presente É uma constante luta para manter a preservação dessa casa e dessas tradições, e o nosso passado, que é a nossa ancestralidade, está sendo constantemente atacado e ameaçado. Essas duas obras falam um pouco disso. A obra O Encantar dos Ancestrais é delicada porque ela fala sobre essa questão da espiritualidade indígena, fala sobre esse lugar para os nossos ancestrais descansarem e encantarem em paz, né? É por isso que a mulher ela está se transformando em flor e em passarinhos ao mesmo tempo, porque é para despertar também nas pessoas o fato de que nós não só fazemos parte da natureza, né? Nós somos a própria natureza, né? Então, como é que nossos ancestrais e nós, que seremos futuros ancestrais, vamos fazer essa transição para essa dimensão espiritual da mata, sendo que esse lugar está sendo destruído, sendo que o rio está sendo contaminado, sendo que uma serra está sendo invadida pela especulação imobiliária, sendo que terras indígenas, esse lugar sagrado, está sendo desrespeitado desde a invasão, né? A obra Levante pela Terra é uma obra que quer representar a grandeza e a força das mulheres indígenas, né, e recebeu esse nome porque Levante pela Terra é um movimento que está acontecendo agora no Brasil contra a tese do marco temporal, que é uma tese completamente absurda e descabida, né, para favorecer fazendeiro, grileiro, madeireiro, garimpeiro e invasor de terras indígenas, né. O Estado quer literalmente legalizar a invasão e genocídio, com a tese de que só os povos indígenas que estão em suas terras a partir do ano de 1988 têm o direito de reivindicar a posse de suas próprias terras, né? Então, é uma colagem também que vem para defender a bandeira da autodemarcação, né? Porque o futuro dos povos indígenas, o futuro dessas gerações não pode ficar à disposição de políticos, né, que governam em função de interesses de determinados grupos que estão completamente contra nós. Eu queria agradecer de coração a Marissa pelo convite de poder participar do Fórum Mundial de Mulheres do Sul Global, de poder participar da exposição e falar sobre a minha arte junto com outras artistas incríveis, e que mais eventos como esse aconteçam para valorizar esse movimento das mulheres poderem pensar, criar, expor, manifestar e imaginar seus próprios futuros possíveis.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Nadia. I hope everyone was able to also view the art through the link. Nadia, I don't know if you want to share it very briefly, or I can share it if you want. Have it open.
I can do it.
Okay, sure.
Yes.
So in Mavi's short speech, she shares on her pieces, with one name being called The Enchantment of Ancestrals, which would be the first one. Scroll down. I'm just making sure I have the names. Oh no, I think that's the incorrect one. Sorry. The first one would be, and yes, I don't know Portuguese. Oh, Uprising for the Land. And again, I could just briefly say what she expressed in the video, but you may not have caught, is that it is a work that aims to represent the greatness and the power of Indigenous women, and was given the name because Uprising for the Land is a movement that is happening now in Brazil against the timeframe limitations of legal Indigenous territories protection discussed in the Brazilian Congress, which is a completely unreasonable attitude which favors farmers, land grabbers, loggers, miners, invaders, and invaders of Indigenous land. The state wants to literally legalize invasion and genocide with the defense that only Indigenous people who have been on their lands since the year of 1988 have the right to claim ownership of that land, of their own land. So it is also a collage which defends the flag of self-demarcation, because the future of Indigenous peoples and the future of those generations cannot remain available to politicians who serve to defend the interests of certain groups that are completely against Indigenous people. And then the other one, which is the enchantment of Ancestrals is a delicate piece because it speaks about that question about Indigenous spirituality. It talks about the place for our ancestors to rest and enchant in peace, and that's why she's transforming into a flower and into little birds at the same time, because it's also to make people understand the fact that we are not only part of nature, we are nature. So how will our ancestors and we who will be ancestors in the future, how will we make this transition to the spiritual dimension of the forest, given that that place is being destroyed, given that the river is being contaminated, given that the mountains are being invaded by real estate speculation, given that Indigenous land, the sacred place, is being disrespected since invasion. So those are Mavi's two amazing pieces from Brazil. We're very happy and appreciate her allowing us to exhibit these pieces. So up next, we have Dainalyn. Dainalyn is from Jamaica. Sorry, just give me a minute. Okay, so briefly, I'll just read a small bio about Dainalyn Swaby. Okay, so Dainalyn Swaby is a development communication specialist and climate change advocate. In her professional and volunteer roles, she focuses on climate awareness and youth engagement. She has represented Jamaica and the Caribbean, sharing country experiences and participating in climate change forums internationally. A 2019 Chevening Scholar, Dainalyn recently completed an MA in Global Communication and Development at Loughborough University, London. Dainalyn is a 2001 Global Climate Network Ambassador and the host of Global Yadi, a podcast series listened to in 30 countries. Welcome, Dainalyn.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Marissa. Pleased to be here. And no, I'm not sure if I'm supposed to explain the context of my poem now, or we could do that after, but I'm very excited.
Yeah.
Sure, thank you. So I'm very excited to perform my poem, TikTok, Nature's Clock. I wrote a poem for you today, Earth. Love letters to you can never be enough. Love knows no bounds, but maybe we've loved ourselves a little too much and pushed past our boundaries, your planetary boundaries. Now, we've gotten ourselves in quite the mess. In my culture, we say, what a preke. To the rest of the world, what a pickle. It's time to confess, whether we did it or they did it, we're all in this mess. We write countless poems with such flair, such finesse. We strike, we hike, we hold meetings, make commitments that seem fleeting. Getting to the real actions, we feel somehow under duress. Climate change means more than recycle. Recycle paper, recycle plastic. How about recycle purpose? How about reuse and repurpose the same tired words and make new meaning? While the blanket around the earth gets thinner, let's remove the blanket around our words in defining action. Many messages moving throughout media. While TikTok challenges circulate throughout the day, TikTok says nature's clock slipping through the fray. TikTok, as the small farmer now struggles to sustain the land which sustains the man and the woman. TikTok, as fisher folk has to take stock of the stock they can no longer take. TikTok, pipes run dry, the eyes of nature flooding us with tears, flooding us with fears. TikTok, move your opinion off social media and into the ballot box. Let's take a pit stop. Stop thinking this is just a science situation. Forget those fancy meetings. This is not just about international relations. This is more than good weather versus bad weather, but whether we can come together. Men, women, children, this is everybody's business. How are you running your business? Let's talk about youth getting a seat at the table. We need everyone doing what they're able. We've seen in recent times we're more than capable. So I'm writing a love letter to you because now we remember what we have forgotten. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dainalyn, and for all the energy that you bring with it. We're so grateful for that. So now just a few questions. I promise a few. As you discuss your piece and just your background in art, communications, etc. So firstly, how long have you been creating art and how did you start? Can you talk a bit about what it's like being an artist within a Jamaican context within the Caribbean?
Okay, first of all, I'm very excited to enter this conversation looking at, climate creativity and being an artist. For me, the culture has been something that I've always been passionate about. But I wouldn't say that I started out like writing original pieces. So as you mentioned in my bio, I have been in this space as it relates to climate communication, climate engagement and awareness. But I think there was a pivotal moment that also happened for me around 2019. So we have a cultural icon in Jamaica called Miss Lou. And, we look up to her. She's the person who brought patois or Jamaican dialect international to the world. So in 2019, in September, I did a spontaneous recording in tribute to her as a statue was erected. That kind of went viral locally, and I got the privilege in that same month to attend the first UN Youth Climate Summit, and I met a Nigerian colleague, and he was saying, whoa, I saw your poem, loved it, but you should be writing poems about climate change. And I'm like, I should really. But sometimes, Marissa, you're sitting on your talent. But then I thought about it more, my background, spreading awareness of climate change, and also even in different experiences, I used to encourage people to say, you don't have to enter the conversation, in just one avenue. And, long and short of it, a year later, I saw what was happening. I went in a reflective mode and I'm like, why don't I just put how I'm feeling inside this poem? Because I said, I'm going to do it. I didn't assign a timeline, and it was just the onset of the virus and everybody having this discussion about how things are changing, the environment is getting a chance to breathe. And then I'm like, listen, this is not overnight, but I found it in me to say, as a communicator, I love culture, I love climate, communication, and I want to operate at the intersection of all those three, as I said, to use and channel what it means to advocate through creative expression. So I'm not a visual artist, not much of a dance. Well, I love dancing, but, like I said before, it's about connecting with people through many points of engagement as possible, because not everybody is a part of the academic community or has interest to sift through a document or a policy paper. But then there is an opportunity using song, using a poem or other forms of artistic expression to connect with people, to meet people where they are, getting or giving them an opportunity to stop, listen, stimulate their consciousness or their perspective. And that's what poetry does, appealing to the emotions. So it definitely has sparked something within me. So I'm on my fourth original piece, some of them not necessarily EV specific, but it does help. So I have another local poem, but it was more in the context of an environment controversial issue emerging in Jamaica. But it was an opportunity to also include the wider society, because sometimes when you have the environmental advocates championing a situation, and you don't know what they're quite fighting for. I see Priyanti asking if we can hear it. So interestingly, it's in the dialect, so I'm not sure if everybody's gonna understand it, but what I could do is drop the link, and if you could screen share that, that would be something that I'm sure you want me to do that, so I'm gonna try to
I was going to actually ask you to share it at the end. I wasn't gonna take all the time of it.
Right. So right, it has a better captions than me. I know that for sure. I'd probably lose everybody if I were to do that. But like I said before, I really realized that before this, but it's just reinforcing how potent poetry and artistic expression is in connecting people and getting us to have deeper conversations about the issue. And I packed so much into that piece when I looked at it line by line to dissect it, to show you that it gives you an opportunity, as I said before, to present a platter, you know, of climate issues and represent them in this one space. You know, so I really want to continue doing that and finding ways to connect people with art through this means.
Thank you for that, Dainalyn. I actually think you have connected with many of us, from those asking for other pieces in the chat, but also in the way that you expressed it. As I said, the piece is very energetic. So I think that the expression of that specific piece, the way in which you speak about climate issues, the way you also in a very nuanced or silent way called out, like, you know, governments and who should be in rooms, I think that was very well done. I probably wouldn't have brought it over that nicely. But yeah, I think it really should turn heads, or, you know, raise eyebrows, even though there are persons who wouldn't so much agree with what was said. So
Definitely.
Now I wanted to ask you to take me through the genesis and the context of this piece. So what, yes, you expressed like the reason you move forward with it, but what circumstances within your country, more specifically, again, like the things you said in terms of having a seat in the room, those kinds of stuff, or whatever, what governments are doing and not doing. What circumstances did you see around you that actually influenced the direction and the themes that came out in that piece?
Well, a lot of it, well, almost everything, I think, you know, connects to a local context, and it also can be connected and interpreted in the larger global context and environment as well. But starting locally, you know, when we talk about Jamaica, a vulnerable country, and we're susceptible to the impacts of climate change, and that's definitely something where everybody can connect or experience, you know, even if they're not able to articulate what climate change is in the same way. The extreme impacts is undeniable. So when I first even looked at climate change means more than, you know, recycle paper, recycle plastic, we don't necessarily have that culture, even though we're encouraging that kind of behavior. So, you know, so even climate action, we speak about climate action in such a generic way. It's not the same as saying gender-based violence, and I hope I don't offend people by using that analogy, but the point I'm trying to make is that when you say gender-based violence, or if you choose another issue, you know exactly what it means. Stop gender-based violence, you understand that. Take climate action, it has so many layers to that. So sometimes when you're in this space, you unconsciously or inadvertently become part of a bubble. So you're speaking in this generic way, and people who are not close to the conversation or paying attention to the conversation on a daily or frequent basis, they don't know what climate action is. So it means that for us in this space and championing the cause, we have a responsibility to break it down. What does this action mean? What does it look like? So in that space now, everybody getting caught up on TikTok. And so I thought it was a perfect way, because TikTok, that social media space, but at the same time, it's this onomatopoeic expression, you know, indicating the passage of time. The clock is ticking, and we're talking about action, and we're running out of time, and, you know, nature is being neglected while, you know, we're doing and moving on with the rest of our life. So now I'm coming down to the local impacts that I can definitely relate to. The small farmer, even before COVID, it always used to be a challenge with the frequent drought or extended, you know, period dry spells, and that's something that impacted agriculture and their yields and their income opportunity. And so farming sustains the land. And then I make sure to put on "and the woman," because now I wanted to acknowledge in a way the omission sometimes of women from the discourse, and we understand that you know, the intersection of climate and gender is something that we also have to put in the force. So that's why I said "and the woman," because sometimes these discussions exclude women from the conversation. TikTok, as the fisher folk take stock of the stock they can no longer take. Also, the fishery sector, the blue economy, is important to Jamaica. Almost 30% of Jamaicans employed in the fishery sector. So when we have the ocean temperatures or the ecosystem changing because of the impacts of climate change, it means that fishermen either have to go further at sea, putting their lives at risk, to catch, and the fish stock as well are being affected because of how the ecosystem is changing. And it's affecting us as well when we speak about food security, drought again, people not having access, water availability, water shortage, something that is affecting people within Jamaica, people globally. So, and coming back though, moving your opinions off social media and into that ballot box, the hypersensitivity of social media, or just the prolificacy of messages, there's a strong environment activism or strong in climate change presence on social media. But we also have to understand that we have to move it from the digital space to the local space. And even our elected representatives, that's where they come in, because we have such strong opinions, and we recognize that we have the capacity to make change. But the biggest way that we can influence the system is to choose who we want to see represent us. And we need to know what their stance is on environmental protection and preservation. So as I said before, those were some of, those issues that circulate in a local context, and it's also applicable globally. But, I'm enveloped in when it comes to those things, talking about good weather versus bad weather. Like I said, a lot of people, they scratch the surface when they think about climate change, but it's more than just that. And it's an inclusive conversation. It's about collective action. That's why I say men, women, and children, everybody's business. How are you running your business? That's also speaking to the systemic change that needs to happen, not just at a government level. I know I sound like I'm preaching. Not just at the government level, but private sector, several industries. We focus a lot on individual behaviors, but I think, as I mentioned, the organizational perspective is very important. Key players and leaders in certain industry, the value chain actors, how are you incorporating sustainable business practices in what you do? So, I was trying to touch on a bit of everything, when I spoke about that.
And very
just
well
giving
done.
you a break.
Very well done. I think if persons didn't know about the current situation as it pertains to climate change or the environment in Jamaica, I think even you just breaking it down, you gave them a perfect example, and it's really good too that it also applies very broadly across the board, whether it's within Asia, within Latin America, etc. I find that all of these issues still have some place in some of the countries in the global south, which is quite admirable, and more reason why we should continue, as everyone is saying across all of the sessions we've done so far, that building allyship across the global south is key. It's the only way that we can move forward in terms of fighting climate justice or fighting against these issues.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
So, okay, you explained so much, so you explained a bit of what we wanted to touch on. But most importantly, where do you draw your influence for your art from your creativity from?
Where do I draw my inspiration?
Yeah.
It's funny. I had a conversation with somebody close to me last night asking that question. And I think it happens in such random ways for me. But for this, I just thought that it was a personal conviction. And of course, as I mentioned in some context, that encouragement from people to say, I see you can, do this. So everybody's different, where maybe they grew up in somewhere or whatever. But for me, as I said, I recognized that I had that capacity, and it was just the time, like the environment was speaking to me. This was around Earth Day when I penned this poem, and I just reflected on all that was happening, the conversations that were happening in so many corners of the globe, and just looking at my society, my lived experience, and what my fellow countrymen and Jamaicans are experiencing. And I just packed all of that in. Sometimes it will happen randomly, and I just decided, like, I'm going to speak on this. So when I'm so moved, I think maybe that's the best way to put it for me. When I'm so moved, that's the best time, because the words just flow and everything just starts making sense once I get it out on paper. So now I'm actually, as I said, sometimes I'm thinking I should do another poem, but it doesn't work like that. It does, some random force just hits me and I get going.
Okay, because I was actually, thanks for saying that. My next question was going to be about what is your process like in terms of creating pieces, you know, feeling creative? Like, I mean, and very
Yeah.
honestly, you can tell us about it. As you said, you know, it just comes, but what is that process like for you? And when you do get into it, what is it like?
Yeah, so sometimes it's really, I write a line and I say it out loud. It's just so interesting because now it's something that edifies me and actually demonstrates to myself like, Dainalyn, you have something here. Because when I think about writing an essay, oh my God, it's like I'm, bursting my brain trying to figure out, even when you're reading and you're having guidance. So just from my experience, the pieces that I've written, it didn't take any kind of research to say, let me read about it and then write about it. I'm just writing one line and then it just something with it. There's just a rhythm and a momentum that I get into where I literally don't have to think about the next line. And I find that so amazing because now I can admit to myself, girl, you do have talent. And I say that because for so long I've been sleeping on it. And I think it underscores that part about believing yourself and speaking about your confidence, and actually operationalizing that confidence. And for some of us, as women, Black women, women in the global South, you just have to take up space and sometimes not wait until people give you the opportunity, because we're in certain contexts, we're still trying to scramble and fight for that. So I think part of it is also discarding a kind of insecurity to say, can I, because I don't sound a certain way and my poem is not deep and it's not in that erudite or that traditional way of describing things that have deep emotional appeal and ethos and all that jazz. So I think, as I said, for me, it's also like an esteem building process to not sleep on your talent, to not downplay your abilities, and to say, I am putting it out there, exposing my vulnerability, because part of you're concerned, will people like it? Will this get backlash? So it's also a part of me, embracing my courage, and I share all of that because maybe I'm hoping that resonates with people in this room, people online listening, because there are other things that you would want to put out, and you grapple with those same things. And I'm here to say, believe in your own conviction and be guided by your passion, your desire, and not so much try to drown out what you think, how you think people react. And just, if you want to do something, if you're passionate about it, just take that plunge. As cliched as it sounds, it does make sense.
Yeah, just do it, like he said.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, another question. So, but how do you find that your creativity has evolved during the pandemic? Would you say that it has evolved, with COVID-19 underscoring how much imbalance there is, the anxiety, everything around it, especially like in the crisis response for the states and the impacts on minorities, like how have you, has that even impacted you in the way that you then find to produce your creativity, or to use your creativity?
I actually found that's the opposite, because what really happened at COVID, I was completing my master's then, and it was March, and we just went into lockdown, and it was crazy because people are talking about online and pivoting. It was hell for me, Marissa, because I'm a face-to-face person, and I had a final assignment to complete for a course, and I was going crazy. This is a vivid memory of me downstairs around 2-3 a.m. in the morning trying to really stamp out that essay, and I took a tea break, and I was just fussing in my dialect, like me start cuss, I started to like just go crazy in the kitchen, and I said, imagine, look how long me a plan. So, like, look how long me say more come school of foreign. So that was me saying, it's been a while. I've been saying I wanted to attend school internationally. And I just started speaking to myself, and it evolved into a poem, and I grabbed my phone, I recorded it. And then the next day I memorized it again, and I went to the park and I did a video. So it was called Wet Corona, meaning go away Corona. And people were mesmerized because I was in the Olympic Park in London, just utilizing different scenes, startling the people because, you know, they see this crazy girl speaking into a camera in Jamaican patois, like what's going on? Like, so you mentioned about the creativity and Corona. So that was, I think, the starting point, because it was after that point and then I did the Nature's Clock, you know, the TikTok, and then at the end of the year I did that Porta Bueno poem that was kind of pulling people in on that government decision to mine in one of Jamaica's I wouldn't say like protected areas, but it's an area that has a lot of ecological heritage significance, and you know that broke it down for people. Why is this area important? You know, like it's a limestone zone, all of that jazz. And then I'm actually working on another one that's connected to the vaccine. Maybe I'm just like letting the cat out of the bag right now, but it has been an avenue to help manage anxiety, mental health. I really you know, confronted like what it means to struggle with mental health. And everybody, I think even if you did it before, everything was heightened, and writing gave me a form of release. Performing, sharing it with people, you know, it does bring some form of relief. So I'm happy that I kind of developed this creative element and edge, so that it does help to take the edge off a lot of what is happening. Oh my God, I said a lot right there.
No, I like it. We appreciate it, because I mean, we're all in our different areas of work. Creativity is yours. And I mean, we're all trying to manage this pandemic. You know, we're still in it. We're still trying to figure it out. So like learning or hearing from you is also quite good. You know, we get an idea of maybe one of us may consider being creative if possible. But yeah, so have you always worked in this area, in this medium, in writing? And what does it mean to be a like Black person or Black artist working in this medium within Jamaica, of course, and the Caribbean, but also did you like take on anything while studying in London, etc.? Did people actually know, like, did you engage with colleagues or groups about your art, etc.? Did you have those experiences?
When you say work in the area, are you mean specifically the like creativity, cultural, creative?
Yes.
So not exactly. It's just that in a way, people know me to be very passionate, or people know that I have an affinity for culture, a little bit of context. In 2017, I was Miss Jamaica Festival Queen. So that is a pageant that, you know, kind of celebrates a post-independent Jamaican woman. And it's kind of a vanguard for female cultural ambassador, female cultural representation. So, and, you know, fun fact, I come from St. Elizabeth. That's a parish in Jamaica. And I was the first person in the 55-year history of that pageant to win from the parish of St. Elizabeth. So that was a big deal for me, people from my hometown, and you know that, you know, provided me the opportunity to kind of promote culture. So I've always, you know, as I mentioned in the previous times, you know, reciting Miss Lou poems, and you know, she's a Dr. the Honorable Louise Bennett Coverley, very significant cultural icon in Jamaica. So people kind of made that association, and I didn't realize, Marissa, that I was kind of even in a regular setting promoting that, because I used to do it for performances. I remember being in class and we were looking at decolonization, and I backed out this poem that I was taught in high school literature about colonial girls' school. And, you know, for my classmates, that was kind of a different element and something that they're not exposed to. And I like that, because it means that I'm not displaying I'm not just a performer and doing it in a performative way. You know, it's really about it becomes organic, and it becomes natural for me to liken, you know, poetry and art in even natural contexts and settings. And so that's something that, you know, now that I look back, it always has been a part of me, a part of my process. And then nothing is no wrong with trying to make that a deliberate thing as well.
Thank you so much. Very, 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 very good. I mean, you're sharing a lot, so we're very happy to learn about these things too, because I guess a lot of our work is advocacy, but there's, also the very creative side to it. So we really appreciate you
Yeah.
sharing. Do you feel that there are any challenges or opportunities in terms of the tension between representation and specificity, apologies, except for example, creating work for a general audience compared to connecting with a certain demographic or group?
That's a very good question. A lot to mull over in that space because, honestly, there was a time where, you operate in that local bubble, but then especially when you have international exposure, that's where you are able to actually weigh, what it means to be a representative of whatever group that you're a part of. And even though there are some platforms that space is made for you because people, there's all this push about diversity and representation of different ethnicities and backgrounds and whatever label that you are, you choose to enter the space with. It's like you get into the club and you find out, oh, that's what everybody's talking about. And in some spaces, it's almost like a struggle where you feel overlooked in a lot of ways. And then sometimes when you're giving too much attention, it becomes suspicious because it sometimes comes off as tokenistic engagement, depending on the particular space. So I do have, those experiences are increasing for me and making it apparent. And that's, why we fight for what we fight for, because the space, it's not always handed to you. And I've come to understand that. And I'm happy that, I kind of have this loud voice and this authoritative speaking way. And now, people used to make me feel bad for that before, but now I don't care because now it makes people listen a little bit more. And, long and short, they don't play with you when you speak out in a room. So, and I find that a lot of it is happening. I've experienced it, even to an extent. I've been in spaces and you kind of feel that white invisibility. Like you're there, you said something, you didn't say something. But as I said before, it's really why I even had my podcast, standing in your own gap and creating space and not waiting until you're handed a platform. So now I realize that in an international context, I don't just speak as a Jamaican, I speak as a Black person from the global South, whether deliberate or indeliberately, you're even a part of a feminist movement when you understand the implications of gender and climate change. So even in the beginning, if all of that wasn't apparent to you, through your engagements, through your interactions, that has become, very apparent now. And it then changes and shapes the responsibility that you have and the work that you do when engaging in that space. So even if I can be an example to another Black girl or another, minority person doing similar work, or it inspires you to put out your work, I believe that's very important because no, we're in we need to take up space. And for me, it's not a big deal, or it's not very important that you are recognized as the only person or a unique thing. We need that critical mass, to display who we are and to build that platform for representation for ourselves.
Wow, very well said. I really appreciate that answer. What do you think art can show us about building a better world, especially post COVID-19?
What can art show us about building a better world? I think it's the way that when you look at art, when you listen art, when you behold art, it's like it's packaged in a way that it makes sense. I don't know how universal this phrase is. Make it make sense, Art does that, the reflective way of how you assemble and put pieces together, and then how it flows into a single narrative to say it links. It performs, it connects so many issues, so many things, and boils down to a solution in a way that is so simplistic. But and not in a reductionist way, but simplistic meaning, okay, it's not that complicated. And we have that power and capacity to make choices. And you realize that the power to make change is a choice. You know, I don't think we're at a space, the issue about climate change and the issue about COVID, it's not that we don't know the solutions. It's not that we don't have the answers. We do. But it comes down to, guys, we can make a choice and choose to be different. And I think, you know, art has a very creative and that unique way of making that make sense.
Thank you, Dainalyn. Very helpful.
Yeah.
And
I was
think
reading
we
the
can-
chat.
Oh, I didn't, sorry, not looking at the chat, but what I can say is very similarly to what you're saying, even the art we saw earlier by Mavi and then Deborah that we spoke to yesterday, there definitely is a way that art can portray all of this, is a way that, in this creative way, that it offers like a different interpretation, or as you said, more simplistic, not saying that we're, you know, changing or altering what it really is, but it offers an even better explanation in some ways, and a more, again, simplistic way in which persons could get an understanding. Because I'm certain if persons listen to your TikTok, Nature's Clock, persons would be like, wow, you know, this is really happening. And this, you know, this is the reality. Yeah. To put persons in a room and say, hey, we're going to read to you, or, you know, it might be difficult. But if more, I guess, local persons too, who are not like engaged in the conversation, who are also not very aware that, you know, that this isn't just that every year we have hurricane season, you know, I think like that's what people in the Caribbean think. We have been living so long and we came along and you learn in school, hurricane season is from whenever to whenever, and you expect hurricanes to come then, but that's it. There's no real explanation behind it. There's no explanation of what climate change is, and this is the impact, you know? So yeah, I really do agree that art tells stories, you know? Art, it makes it very simple.
Yeah, and it's a conversation starter, so that's so true.
Definitely. So our final question for you is, how an art, well, in your opinion, how are art and the environmental justice movement linked? And what role do you see you and your art in the future playing in mobilizing change, whether in Jamaica, within the Caribbean region, or just in general, within the global work?
Okay, how is art and the environmental justice movement linked?
Yeah,
I think from a long time. So I think I'm thinking a lot, right? So when I reflect on art and I reflect on environmental issues, they've always been connected. So before climate change was that specific conversation point, or before we spoke about global warming, or whatever term of the day that we spoke about, you know, the urgency and what's happening to the world and planet Earth, people have always been paying ode to the environment through art. We've always been honoring that. And I know we have that recently, or make that coin, that phrase or coin term, artivism, you know, which provides this avenue for people to express themselves through art and to mount resistance and to make protest statements through art. So I think I don't know if it's a chicken and an egg situation, but it has always coexisted and existed in harmony. And I would have mentioned before that when we speak about climate action or talking about climate change, the conversation doesn't always mean dialogue and verbal dialogue like we're having now, or written dialogue, and that's where art comes in. I remember in my experience working for a climate project where we had an environmental awareness through music workshop, where we had young men from a community in Portland in Jamaica, where they were passionate and they were looking to, you know, aspiring musicians and artists, recording artists. We had a workshop that explored that element of music production for them, but we also used it as an opportunity to say, hey, you could fit environment messages through music. And I listened to those guys speak, and they they're not the best at articulating climate issues and why they take action when you're speaking to them directly. But through song, they are the same ones that sit down and package those lyrics in a way that makes sense. And if that is not a testament to say, use what you have to make a statement, then nothing else is. And it's just in the same way where somebody can write a poem and somebody can draw a very compelling visual narrative about how the earth is suffering, about how their community is challenged. And, photography, when we speak about visual and not even video sometimes, because photography, sometimes in one still moment, you're able to say so much. So when I think about so many pieces of artistic expression before, we've come into 2021, if you want to even look at it from a calendar year perspective, it has always been this element of connectivity when you speak about art, when you speak about environmental justice. And sometimes art becomes so much more potent and gives us room to say more than what we could ever do through words or through writing or through any other piece. So I think we can't leave art behind in the conversation. If anything, it has to be intertwined.
And what do you see as your role or your art? What role do you see yourself or your art playing in mobilizing this change? And don't forget that you have a piece for us after this.
I think that piece is easier for people to watch than for me to perform. It feels so weird. And partly because I forgot all the words, but it's easy. It will make more sense for people to I dropped it in the link actually in the chat. But I'm getting back to that question, the role I see my art playing, stimulating consciousness, providing an opportunity to expand people's awareness and also their perspectives and think about an issue differently. So yes, none of the issues that I put into that poem are things that are lost on people. You may have different elements that are lost on different people, or we don't fully consider or register it. And I do think by putting it into the context that I did, it makes people think about it differently. And what I hope that it can do is also stimulate the consciousness of those who recognize that they are in a position, even though all of us are, but it's just in terms of the timeline, that you recognize that you're in a position to do something about it, because the different lines appeal to different people who have different roles in our society. So I hope that, people with those different roles, it now speaks to you and it inspires other people to say, I like doing poems, or I like doing something else. I can also do this, because a lot of times it appeals to your personal or your self-efficacy. When you see somebody doing something that is similar to what you can do, it makes you also, brave enough to step out and to also try that. So if nothing else, I hope that, I can achieve that through my art.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Dainalyn. You said that you wouldn't want to perform it, right? Should I share it or?
Right, yeah, I placed it in there to kind of to share.
Okay, Nadia, do you?
I can share it. Yeah, no problem. I'll share it now.
Just make.
Yeah. Now I gotta work on my role of being a performer, because if it was a musician, they have all this catalog.
One master, COVID not catch you. Love how you are keep strong. What you mean things now go according to plan? Our them do know upon we island. Approve mining up in the highland. A liar tell them can't get it wrong. Sustain the land for sustain the man. No sir, this bad. Me a come down there. Can't afford quarry start and things get wet. At the last limestone forest left up there. Unique animals and plants up there. We've been here before. Vision 2030 detour. At first you hear about Porta Bueno, your ideas like them. You know see me start tell you. I look at trouble master, I know you hear well. Cool no man, make me give you the intel. The limestone are important aquifer. It carry and filter the groundwater. Remove it, water stop run under. That mean more place with less water. If rain fall, throw it there upon the surface. That'll bring more for down. We can't take that. That's why as a people we can't stop chat. And you imagine when them the night start, those are blowing in your ear, you can't see where you are walk. Yes, they do know it's not a quarry zone. So sing that song till the cows come home. This need crowd. Use hashtag protect Puerto Bueno. Yes, you too. On the brand new phone where your grandson send you. Me like how you call and talk to me, you see. So master, call him and talk to him too.
I love that. I hope everyone understood it and there was a caption, so that was quite helpful. But that was also quite powerful. It's like you may think it's a small gesture, but I think in your small way that it could affect change. You know, you even added the hashtag, etc. But you were speaking through things. You know, you spoke to the limestone, you spoke to the impacts it would have on people. And, you know, like when we're talking about dust blowing in our eye during the construction or whatever, having it as a quarry, that could go on forever, you know, and it isn't just about that. It's like how that further impacts people, and not just as impacts of the environment, but also in terms of health, you know. So I think that is very powerful. We're
Thank
seeing
you.
comments in the chat. Persons loved it. So I really appreciate this. Dainalyn, do you have any final words for us?
Sure. And I appreciate what Priyanthi, I'm hoping I'm getting the pronunciation correct. She said, the person said, love the rhythm and cadences of that one. So I'm like, ooh, I don't even like, you know, cadences. Like, this is a big compliment. But just to give everyone context as well, I was speaking in Jamaica and even parts of the Caribbean, you say mas Tom. So, you know, you say Mr., like it's usually indicative that you're speaking to an elderly male. So to give you a bit of context, our Prime Minister, in several speeches before, he referred to Mas Tom as somebody. So we don't know if this is an actual person or a persona, but he refers to Mas Tom as somebody who either from his community or who knows of him and looks up to him and, you know, encourages him to make the right decision, you know, all the time. And even in our recent election, which was September of last year, when he said, you know, going into the election room or the polling station and saw Mastam, and he and Mastam had an exchange. So because of the Porta Buena issue, as I said before, it was kind of a controversial situation where mining was approved in that zone, and it was actually an overturning of a decision by the environmental watchdog of Jamaica. So their decision was overturned as the private entity made an appeal, which was upheld by the office of the Prime Minister. So, you know, that's why I reference Mastam to say Mastam calling me. So that's why in the last part, when I say Mastam, call him and talk to him for me. So it's really saying like we're asking Mastam to reason with the PM on our behalf. So, you know, some persons, you know, and that's what you kind of have to do. I recognize as an artist, you know, that's what kind of plug people in. But for me, it's about speaking out and finding a way to say we don't support this particular decision that you made. But also the bigger part of it for me was that more people were able to join this conversation and to see why we had a challenge. But outside of that, you asked about last words. I just want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to share my piece and for this platform. I know, you know, I may sound confident, which I am, but it's really opportunities and moments like this that also helps to validate, you know, what I do and to encourage you to say, share your work. You know, I came across this saying, you know, about what you do makes a difference, or you have to believe that what you do makes a difference, because it does. And, you know, I'm just really inspired that we have a platform like this, not just about distilling the creative and cultural elements, but even larger movement of, you know, global South, you know, feminist movement, recognizing how important that is in our context. And I just want to encourage people wherever you are to just believe that what you do makes a difference. And there are people out there who are waiting on things that you haven't even done yet. And that's so incredible.
Well, thank you so much, Dainalyn. And those final words were quite powerful. We really appreciate having you, taking this time, being up so early to be with us. But thank you so much and have a good day. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, as well.